What happens when your lifestyle choices, the things you choose to voluntarily put in your calendar, are actually the things that are contributing to mental illness in your marriage? What to do about it, if that's you, is what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to offer some strategies from very, very, very lived experience that help us navigate these things.
My name is Josh Canning. This is my beautiful wife, Lisa Canning, and we manage a community called Persevere Together. If you want assistance in living out your marriage vocation, despite the challenges that come through different mental illness, depression, anxiety, whatever the case, you are in the right place. Thank you for joining us.
We help Catholics navigate mental illness in their marriage because the key word in that sentence is navigate. I don't think you can heal. God can do anything. You can heal from mental illness, surely. But I think our experience with it is more that it's something I was going to say but then I was like, it's definitely our, so that I came out our experience with it is that you navigate it, meaning that there are times when it's present. There are times when it's maybe not as present.
Mm-hmm.
There's times when you think, oh, wow, we're like over and done with it.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is great.
Yeah.
And then it can come roaring back,
Yeah.
So we wanted to just tackle what it looks like when it is lifestyle related. So maybe it would be helpful to define some terms first.
Sure. Okay. Which terms? Which terms? Do you want to just define any terms?
So when we say lifestyle, what I'm referring to are just simply the things you put in your calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So to be very, very practical for the purposes of this conversation, we are both working.
Mm-hmm.
We are both working individuals. I have a very, very full-time job. I struggle to put an hourly total on the number of hours I work because I think about work a lot. I enjoy my work a lot. I will say that from the hours of 4 p.m. to, 8 p.m., I guess, when my children are home, I am present. So I typically do not schedule meetings. It is very much like family time, but then I would say, somewhat regularly picking up work again in the evening, and I travel for work. And Josh, you have your own things on the go as well. So we are both working. That's not to be not talked about.
And also we are raising 10 kids.
Not to be not talked about.
And that's obviously going to be in some ways all encompassing. It means that we do life differently than when we were first married and had 0 kids.
Our 10 children all have friends, all have, not the baby. The baby doesn't have friends, but you know what I mean.
Baby has a lot of fans.
Baby has fans, but especially the school age ones, they have social lives, they have extracurricular activities. There are many things that happen over here.
Sure. So there's baked in busyness already, right? So, and obviously we can't delete from the essential things. And if you have kids, if you're married, you have kids, there are certain things you cannot simply delete from your life. You may be able to edit or alter things. We'll talk about that. But there are, on top of these essentials, there are going to be some, let's just call them non-essentials. There's things that you have some control over, how you do it, how you live, and how you build margin into your life. And how you do that is going to have an impact on both of your mental health.
And that's the second thing I wanted to define, is that there are things that you allow in the schedule. It's kind of like there's the suffering that God allows, and then there's the suffering you create. That's what my spiritual director reminds me of all the time. So,
like mortification suffering, or like you just you kind of shot yourself in the foot kind of suffering?
I mean, I think both, to be honest, right? But my point for this is that there are things, like Josh just said, you can't just delete. Like, I can't just be like, oh, everybody, I'm overwhelmed, so you're fending for yourself for dinner indefinitely. Now, I do have old enough children, to be very frank, who I could, if I needed to, be like if I was incapacitated and Josh was away, my children are at the age where they could cook meals, and they could, if motivated enough, they could run the house. But there are a lot of them, and they're still young. Like, we have a lot of young children. And so it's not fair for me, I would say, to expect my, older kids to do all the things that we as parents in our 40s now, it is so weird to say we are both in our 40s.
Yep.
As parents in our 40s have wisdom and experience to navigate. It's not fair for me to expect that of my teenagers that have not done this as long as we have.
Sure.
So I wanted to define those terms because I think they're important. Now, how do we handle overwhelm?
Well, I guess one important thing, there's this, this proverb, know thyself. I guess one might say it's important to understand each spouse's different needs. So Lisa is an extrovert. I am more of an introvert. Lisa does not have clinical mental health issues. I have a history of clinical mental health issues. And therefore, we may have different felt needs at different times. I would say a value of our family is hosting. We believe in hospitality. We believe in the importance of that. We love to fire up the smoker and put on a brisket and invite lots of people over for food. But I think in terms of being realistic about things, that affects us differently, even though we both value it. So we just did this yesterday, by the way. So it was Pentecost. My son got confirmed. It was a beautiful, wonderful day. We fired up the Traeger. We cooked meat. Lisa, monitored it for like 24 hours, and we had a lot of beautiful feasts for people. After we were done hosting, I was exhausted because that's how socializing is and hosting is for me. Despite that I value it and love it, it expends my energy. That's what introverts are like. They expend energy in social situations, even if they like it. Lisa was ready to move on to the next thing. Even though she worked so hard on the meal, she was ready to go shopping with the kids and go do something else and then come back home and start cleaning and all these things, because Lisa is energized as an extrovert by being around people. We have to recognize those differences and navigate how we will collaborate and live that out in marriage, but respect the differences. So.
And this was really challenging for me to accept when we first were young and married, and I didn't understand that mental illness was present. But then very hard for me to accept when I realized what mental illness was. And then we needed to make lifestyle choices. Now, no, to be fair, once I realized what was happening, it was easier for me to accept. But I thought that Josh was just going to come along for the ride in anything I said. I'm so naive. Isn't it so funny?
Lisa thought if she could just figure out the proper way of controlling the situation, then I would be lockstep with her in every single area of our life.
But I tell this story often, that I remember when we were younger, I can't remember if it was when we were dating or we were newly married. It was probably both times, but I would paint my picture of a perfect Saturday. And it was literally from the crack of dawn until falling asleep at night, full of activity. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. I would be first we're going to go to a farmer's market, and then we're going to have like lunch with friends after. And then after that, maybe we'll like go walk around like the park or like a mall, and then, maybe pick up food to eat at home. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll have another family over for dinner, literally all day.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was almost non-negotiable. You were like, we'll do this every weekend with the same people. And I was like, we had a fight about it. Because even in theory, we were already disagreeing about what is downtime like. But I think the point is you do need to prioritize downtime as the person needs it, right?
So many of the things we talk about on this channel they apply to mental illness for sure specifically, but like beyond anyone with a clinical diagnosis. No spouse should be dictating the way you socialize, like without the other one's collaboration. Like, that's just not fair.
You're still individuals.
Nobody wants to feel like they're just being dragged along in life, right? Mm-hmm. But this is equally or even more important when we're talking about mental illness, because sometimes I think your lifestyle can contribute to the triggers, to the elastic band. That's an expression I use a lot here, that it's like an elastic band. Some people have a very high propensity for the elastic band, that is their central nervous system, to expand. Others do not. Others, it's like, whoop, and we're done. And so we need to give a great environment, great ideal conditions for this elastic band to thrive.
but even, I mean, and I know I like the analogy, and I know I've used it in other videos. But even the person with perhaps a stretchier elastic band still does get to a bit of a breaking point, and we've been navigating that a little bit, at least recently, because of successive weekends of work travel. And that takes a real toll. I mean, when we think about it biblically, right, the Lord rested on the seventh day, and we're commanded to observe the Sabbath still as Catholics. And that involves it involves worship, it involves prioritizing the right kind of quality time with family or friends. It also involves rest. And the reality is if you're solo parenting a large group of kids, even if it's not as large as ours, that's going to exhaust certain reserves that you have. And then Monday comes along and it's a school day and a work day. And, eventually there's a lag effect of all this, which we're navigating right now, to be honest. It's been a difficult time for me the last week because I feel myself reacting differently to things than I normally would. That elastic band is stretched all the way, and it's coming out in just negative ways in terms of the way that I find myself responding to intense situations and speaking to members of my family and whatnot. And so that's why we have to pour back into that rest and restoration so that we can be set up for success in our marriage. Would you add anything to that, Elise?
Well, just that here are some practical things that we could like to suggest based on experience that might help you to navigate if your calendar, if your lifestyle is potentially contributing to the triggers and to perhaps a not ideal condition for mental illness in marriage. So number one, I think, is enough self-awareness to know what you need personally, as well as what your spouse needs. And one of the tools that I have found very, very helpful, and I know it was helpful when you read it. I remember when Josh read the temperament description for melancholic, he was like, where has this been our entire marriage?
Right.
So one of the tools that I have used in my coaching practice, but then of course in basically every relationship in my life, to be honest, is the temperaments: sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. And I am very sanguine choleric. So that is outgoing, extroverted, very controlling, very bossy. We run the world. Who run the world? Cholerics run the world. Josh, on the other hand, is literally the polar opposite.
Lord help us.
Melancholic, phlegmatic, although I think you could actually be melancholic choleric. I'm not sure, but just loves quiet, loves deep, intellectual, slow, concentrate.
Yeah, thrives on lack of intensity. Likes to contemplate. And taste things.
Metanoia Catholic, where I went and did my training, they created this beautiful matrix, let's call it, with these statements that express ideal conditions, triggers for the different temperaments. And I remember yours were like literally the things that we have every day of our lives. So like, he does not thrive in being interrupted. He does not thrive in a lot of noise. He does not thrive without the presence of the ability to quietly reflect and process. And I just remember being like, that's like the opposite of most of our daily life. So when you have that self-awareness, you can then at least try to create ideal conditions. So for example, I have no problem now that we don't do Saturdays necessarily all as a big group. Like I have no issue knowing, or I have literally, like, I'm completely neutral about the fact that I love to socialize. And so I might go do things on Saturdays and then give my husband the quiet and introspection that he loves. And then maybe on that Saturday evening, we might have a family over, which again, will continue to fill my cup, but that's just enough for Josh. But for example, here's something that I know now. If we get invited to two things,
like back-to-back days?
Back-to-back days. So in a weekend, back-to-back days, and for sure back-to-back date, like on the same day, I'm just like, we got to pick one.
Yeah.
And I just know this through experience at this point, that we just pick one.
Yeah. And one of the benefits there too is because, like, your kids will also have, if you have a bunch of kids, you'll have kids with similar temperaments, and they don't want the same intensity, and so it's really respectful of everybody to understand differences and try to honor them, not necessarily cater everything so that it's one person kind of call, like we don't want to swing the other way where it's like I'm calling all the shots in all areas, but just respect uniqueness, how we're made in God's image, but with uniqueness, we're different, and that's a good thing, and complementary when we understand it and apply it properly.
So practical tip number 1 would be to have enough self-awareness to know what you need. Practical tip number 2 is then to take that into account when you are scheduling and when you are making decisions for your family, for example, on a weekend. Practical thing number 3 that I want to share is, it's going to sound funny, but like err on the side of, I don't know, caution. Is that the
It
word?
doesn't sound funny to me. I like that. Let's try that in life. let's get to that point.
But like, okay, I'm trying to, I had an example and it's escaping my brain right now, but it comes up a lot where I might be like, okay, here's an example. It's like order dinner. Okay. You could make dinner or you could order dinner. There are times when it would be okay to just have one other thing like making dinner, right? But when I know it's been a busy day, when I know that, I've been in back-to-back meetings and Josh has been on with the kids, and then there might be something like, for example, my oldest was just confirmed, so maybe there's like a confirmation thing that evening, what have you. You can kind of look at your weekday or your week, and like we said, there's certain things that you can't just delete. As much as we want to like arrange our schedules and our lifestyles, but there are certain things that you just can't delete, like a confirmation prep, whatever, right? And so I could be like, Josh, we got to make dinner. Or I could be like, let's order dinner. And so erring on the side of caution looks like ordering dinner. Does that make sense? So if you have a sort of a gut feeling, or there's a pattern that works for you, just go and do that. There was an example that was that wasn't the example that I had that happened recently. Mm-hmm. There was another thing where I was like, oh my gosh, see why this worked? I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, unless food prep is relaxing, like it's grilling weather now, so that might be a way of doing it. But just, I guess, being cognizant of like, how do we lower intensity for a period, because we recognize we've just been through intensity. How do we just make it so it's restful and restorative for everybody as best as we can? Okay, so you have more tips?
Erring on the side of caution. I don't know. Is there a better expression than that?
Erring on the side of margin.
Erring on the side of margin, I think, also applies to childcare. So I have never not been pleased with hiring in or bringing in additional support. Mm-hmm. And I would say sometimes we take a gamble. I'm not going to lie. So meaning sometimes we're like, okay, maybe we're going to be okay. And we're like, okay, don't worry about the babysitter. But I will never refuse an extra pair of hands, mm-hmm. whether I'm in the house, whether I'm full on with the children, whether I'm gone, like just an extra pair of hands who can do other things while maybe you're with the kids, mm-hmm. or while the parent needs a time to retreat. I really think childcare solutions or childcare strategies is an essential skill for a couple with mental illness.
Yeah, let me jump in on that and why I think that's so valuable. So it might just look like an extra pair of hands around the house, making the house cleaner, faster, whatnot. But it actually enables you to do some of the other things that are important for managing your lifestyle towards better mental health, such as if I have a babysitter here, I'm not going to feel guilty if I say to Lisa, do you mind if I run to the gym? And that's really like physical exercise. It's becoming more and more impressed upon me how much that is linked with better mental health outcomes. But I am going to feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes when I know I can see maybe my wife is stressed and managing the kids, to say, hey, can I just run out to the gym? So it's one of those things that either you're planning it really well in your calendar, or the freedom is created because you've got some additional childcare. So all of a sudden you realize, well, there's somebody else helping already. So there's more freedom there for both of you.
And we could probably do a whole other video on navigating childcare. This is something I get asked a lot about in my coaching practice for moms. But very briefly, it can be figured out. Whether it's your mom, whether it's a sister, whether it's a friend, whether it is a woman at your church, whether it's a high school kid, whether it's a college kid, like there are so many different ways childcare can look, paid and unpaid. I remember just walking alongside a young couple who was having mental illness challenges for the very first time. And they were like, we have no family nearby. I have no childcare. And I was like, will you please reach out to a friend and disclose very honestly what is happening and ask them if they will help you. And they did that. And they were able to just put all the kids together and the family watched the kids and all was well.
Isn't that kind of what we're trying to build, like from a Catholic perspective, as a pro-family kind of culture? Like it's there internally, we might not want to put somebody out by asking them for that, but and you were saying earlier, chosen suffering. Like that couple could have said, "You're right. No, we're not comfortable, so we won't do it." And in that sense, they're kind of choosing the suffering of not being able to get that space. But don't we want to allow people also the option and to be building the kind of pro-family, pro-life culture that we want? And wouldn't we ourselves also be moved, if we could, to offer that kind of support to another young family? Sometimes it takes a village, and it's and we should work together in those kinds of moments.
The final practical tip that I want to offer, and I can always talk about mindset, and I can always talk about a spiritual element, but this one is another very practical one, is the need to pause and evaluate. I used to have it in my calendar, literally like on a repeating appointment, to evaluate our life every 90 days. And then somehow in the last 24 months of a lot of life that we've lived, I lost that practice. I think literally probably what happened is I would just ignore it when it would come up as a reminder. But we're just coming off of a series of trips. Josh and I went to New York. And then after that, I had travel alone with the baby without the family. And we did have some childcare, but we realized that we probably need more support when I travel alone. You can't have those conversations without pausing to address the period before, right? And so to take that time, it's almost like before it becomes too acute, it's like intentionally take the time to evaluate rather than wait until something gets too bad that it's too challenging. Do you know what I mean? And then make necessary either steps moving forward. So like, I'll give you one very practical example from the past. And we probably are trying to formulate, I know we are trying to formulate one for the future. But in the past, when we both traveled for work, we always allowed for one full day of buffer.
Yeah.
So on the tail end of the spouse coming back, the spouse who's been on their own is tired.
Because both are tired. Yeah. Sorry. I got too excited because I know what it's like to be coming back from a trip, wanting to help out right away, but also being exhausted because you've been on a work trip,
And so I remember in the past, we purposefully scheduled a babysitter for the day of re-entry for both parents. You want to go on a date together, you want to, all that kind of stuff. And so, that's one really practical thing that we did as a result of evaluating. Again, many of our regular things have been kind of adjusted along the way because we've been through a lot of transition with a big move, but we are currently in a season of evaluating, okay, well, what kind of support, like if I'm going to travel again, what kind of support would be necessary? So maybe I'll just ask you right now, like what would be helpful as we evaluate this past season?
I think we should reinstitute buffer days as one, because then you actually have space to evaluate. It's very hard to evaluate in intensity. And the reality is when you come back from a trip, everyone's excited to see you and everybody wants to catch up and spending time with you. And you also have your other tasks and household things and work to take care of.
Laundry,
yeah, it's just not easy. So I would say we probably do need to reinstitute the buffer days as one thing. Yeah, that's what comes to mind. And I have a couple. I know you gave your tips. I have a couple thoughts as well for maybe the person who maybe experiences mental illness as well to share. But do you have anything you want to wrap up that point with?
Nope.
So one thing I would say is, so we talked earlier about knowing your limits. Or no, I don't think we said know your limits, but knowing yourself. I would add to that knowing your limits. So on Lisa's recent work trip, Mother's Day was coming up. I wanted her to come back to kind of like the perfect scenario. So a really clean house, nice flowers and cards and whatever, gifts from the kids. Everybody going to mass already before she got back, so there would be all kinds of freedom. And to be honest, that was the wrong move. It was well intentioned, but taking 9 kids to mass, especially with a few, let's just call them rebels, it was really too much and put me in not a good space, overwhelmed.
And this is my err on the side of caution comment. That's what I mean by that. Like, that was an amazing gesture. So meaningful to me. Like, just the thought that he would want us to have a freer Sunday on Mother's Day. And so he took all 9 kids to mass, which PS, I would not even like sign up for. We typically do mass in shifts, or we like sometimes we go as a whole family, but we do shifts on purpose. Anyway, so
it was well intentioned, but it was foolhardy in a way, because it wasn't realistic to hope for a positive outcome with some of the personalities involved. God bless them. They're just unique. They're individual. They're in their terrible 2s and 3s and 4s or whatever. So it's not, it wasn't smart. And what came out of that was me being so frustrated, so overwhelmed, that I was kind of a little bit of a wreck. The next day I was just spent. And so obviously, again, we may want to err on the side of just being realistic. Like, this is, I should have deliberated more about that. The last thing related to that, and this is for the person who maybe struggles a little bit, is really, really prioritize good sleep as much as you can, because that has such an impact on so many areas of your mood. So sleep well as much as you can. And I would even say, to the extent that, so we have a baby who nurses at night. It may even mean, if you're in a sleep deficit over a period, it may even mean sleeping in another room for a stretch, because why both be exhausted, So that's one thing. And in terms of my mental health, and in terms of the deposits I'm trying to make, is exercise, and as much as I can, 7 to 9 hours of good sleep, where I'm not watching screens before I go to bed, where I'm not having food or alcohol near bedtime, just trying to like make sure to really let the whole body rest and have a good, set yourself up for success for the next day.
Those are some good tips.
Thank you. Yeah.
We are tired. Like, at the time of creating this video, we are tired because we are coming off of what was an ambitious season that we haven't really done for a while. Like, it's actually, this is like a new habit for us. We have not been in the habit of traveling separately. When you think about it, like, for 3 years of the pandemic, weren't really doing that. And then we moved, and so it's we are, even though we have been doing this, like, navigating mental illness for a long time, we're now rusty in some of the lifestyle related things. And I know myself, I'm finding that I just revert back to kind of like, okay, let's do another trip, But again, this is where the ability to, here's where I will bring up mindset and spiritual life, is just constant docility. Like, what I have learned, that I think is probably my most valuable piece of advice, is just like you love your spouse. And so let's just have a bit of a spirit of docility, like in how you navigate your preferences. And, and it doesn't mean, here's the thing, like, it doesn't mean you can't do things. Like, it doesn't mean you don't travel or you don't do the things, but you just do them in a way that, yes, might be modified, but also is just setting everyone up, including yourself, for success. And that can be done with some strategy and some prayerful, discernment, and from some trial and error. And it's okay if you get it wrong, because you can just modify moving forward.
I don't think we mentioned it too much in this video, but at perseveretogether.locals.com, we have a private community where we can continue this conversation. Come join as a member, and if you really feel that you're receiving value, think about becoming a paid supporter. We really do appreciate that, and it gives us the freedom to spend more time on videos like this. Also, please leave a comment under the video, like and subscribe if you haven't already. We really appreciate interactive stories. We want to know where you're coming from, what you found have worked in terms of managing your lifestyle to set your marriage up for success.
many people have asked us if we do coaching or do we walk with couples one-on-one in this area. And so I want to share with you, when we get to 20 subscribers in our locals community, we will be opening up a group coaching experience where supporters of our locals can come and have, live. You get Lisa and Josh live, and I will coach you using my certified mindset coaching skills in a group environment. So
let's keep encouraging each other. It's worth fighting the good fight. We believe you can persevere together by God's grace, and we entrust ourselves and you to our Lord's care. God bless you.